Hi, I'm Miss Kristen of the Oosterhout Free Library, and March is Women's History Month. So today we're going to celebrate a history-making scientist from Pennsylvania who inspired the environmental movement. Now, environment, have you ever heard that word before? Well, the environment that I'm talking about is the natural world that's all around us, from the plants and the animals that are around us to the air that we breathe and the water that we drink, everything around us. Now, Rachel Carson was born a long time ago in 1907 in Springfield, Pennsylvania. As a little girl, she loved springtime. It was her favorite season, a time to explore and observe all the nature all around us. She loved listening to birds, and she also loved reading and writing as a little girl. She thought she would grow up to be a writer until one day she looked through a microscope and was amazed with what she saw. Have you seen a microscope before? Kind of like this one right here? Well, today we're going to learn a little bit more about Rachel Carson and how you can make your own microscope with items that you have around your house. So let's get started first with the story about Rachel Carson called Spring After Spring, How Rachel Carson Inspired the Environmental Movement. Let's get started.
Spring After Spring, How Rachel Carson Inspired the Environmental Movement. Written and illustrated by Stephanie Roth Sisson. Published by Roaring Brook Press. It was dawn when the chorus began. Rachel didn't want to miss a note. Hello! As the midday sun warmed the earth, other musicians chimed in. Life and music were all around. And wonders big and small. Spring was Rachel's favorite time of the year. As the sun set, she could hear the first bubbles of frog song. Crickets began their nighttime tune, and bats squeaked a lullaby. At home, there was a warm supper and a big family. Mom played the piano, and Dad sang songs and read stories. Rachel's favorite stories were those about the sea. As the days grew longer and warmer, the chattering, chirping, and hooting got louder, until the gathering calls from migrating birds meant that it was autumn. They were coming together for their long journey through the ocean air to their winter homes. But not everyone left. Snuggled under a warm blanket, Rachel drew pictures and wrote about the life she experienced all year. She read books about animals and imagined what their lives were like. Spring after spring, year after year, the birds arrived. Every season, Rachel watched, listened, and wrote. And like the nestlings, she grew quickly. Then one autumn, it was time for her to go off to college. She was sure she wanted to be a writer until she looked through a microscope and saw a small world in a drop of water. Tiny sea plants and animals. Rachel was amazed and in love. She wanted to know more about the very small world made visible by a microscope. She had never been to the ocean and was scared to go in the water. To learn more about the creatures in tidal pools and marshes in the sea, Rachel decided that she would study biology. She was putting her writing aside. After she finished school, Rachel worked as a scientist and compiled information about the ocean. Now, for her job, she wanted to know what it was like to actually be underwater. She was still scared, but she went anyways. Rachel began to write books about the sea. They were so full of scientific detail and vivid descriptions of the lives of sea creatures that people could imagine those worlds. Rachel became a famous author. But there was something wrong. All around, nature's voices were going quiet. So Rachel did what she did best. She watched closely, listened carefully, and learned as much as she could about what was happening. Rachel put together scattered facts and found the answer. People wanted to kill bugs that ate their plants, bothered them, or even made them sick. Chemists created new poisons to solve the insect problems that seemed to work and seemed to be harmless to other creatures and humans. These poisonous chemicals were quickly used everywhere in huge amounts because people thought they were safe. But Rachel found evidence that the poisons were not safe. Rachel decided to write a book to tell people about what she learned. Silent Spring created a huge ruckus. Some people were inspired to change, but many didn't believe Rachel. Eventually, President Kennedy took notice and began an investigation to find out what was true. Rachel was asked to come to Washington and defend her book. She was scared, but she went. Rachel's testimony in Washington and her writing in Silent Spring made people see that they have an effect on the environment and the other creatures that they share the world with. People were inspired to speak up, and Congress passed new laws so that nature was treated with more care, and some of the most harmful chemicals were banned. Spring after spring, year after year, people celebrated the earth and the environment because Rachel showed them how beautiful and precious it is. The end.
Rachel Carson wrote an important book called Silent Spring, which warned people about how people and the chemicals that we use can hurt our environment. This made people want to take care of our environment. And Rachel Carson did this because as a little girl, she was fascinated by all of nature, big and small, very small, just like when she looked through a microscope and was amazed at the tiny living organisms that she saw. What is a microscope? Have you seen one before? Well, a microscope is a tool that scientists use to magnify tiny objects, and it makes them look larger. People use microscopes to see objects that are too small to be seen with the eye alone. Objects like cells or tiny living things, or even grains of sand. Things that you really can't see well with your eyes.
Here's a close-up look at a microscope. Starting at the bottom, you'll see a light. And then next to it, you'll see that she's moving the focus up and down, which moves the slide that you see right in the middle there on that little piece of glass, which is the object that you want to take a look at, closer or farther away from what's at the very top, the lens.
Today, you're going to make a microscope and magnify things using water. You might be wondering, how does this work? Well, if you've ever used a magnifying lens before, you know that it is concave or curved. Well, a bead of water is curved too, and it will make things appear larger than they really are. So to explore that, we're going to make this simple microscope that's really great for even our youngest explorers out there. And the only thing you're going to need is a cup, some saran wrap, and a rubber band. So you put your object in there that you want to take look a little bit closer at. Some suggestions might be a leaf, a string, paper with some words printed on it or images on it. And so you're going to put that in there. Now, if you want to look at a lot of different things, you can cut a hole in the side, and that way you can move things in and out. But I'm just going to look at this one thing, so it's already in there. So then you're going to need a teaspoon and some water. Now, first, before you put the water on there, take a look inside and take a look at your object. Note how it looks. Now you're going to take that teaspoon of water and put it on the top of your cup. So you see how it has a little bit of a bead to it, and it's a little bit of a curve. Now look at it, look inside what you have in there, and you should see a difference. It should appear larger. So how does it work? Well, if you did our leprechaun magical coin tricks from a couple weeks ago, you'll know that when light passes through water, it bends, and it can act like that convex lens of a magnifying lens, bending the light as it passes through and making the sample below look bigger. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Well, what if you wanted to make an even more powerful microscope? Well, that's what we're going to do next. To make this microscope, you're going to need some items that you should have around your house. You're going to need a clear glass jar. You're going to need some aluminum foil, and you're going to need some clear plastic, which I got mine from a leftover bakery box or any other clear plastic box you might have around your house. And you don't need a lot of that. You're going to need a hole puncher, a couple pencils, some scissors, of course, to cut your plastic out. You'll need a flashlight, and you'll need some white paper to put underneath your jar. That will help you see things a little bit better. So you just put that on your table. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your aluminum foil. Now your microscope is going to need a lamp. It's going to reflect the light. You wouldn't want to put a light bulb in here right up at your eye because you wouldn't be able to see very well. So instead, we're going to make some indirect light and reflect it off of this aluminum foil. Doesn't matter what size it is. You're just going to fold it over, fold it in half, and then just make sure that it fits inside your jar, the width of your jar, and then it's going to rest in there like this one is at a little bit of a 45-degree angle. And you're going to do that because you're going to test it out to make sure that it reflects some light. So you're going to put it on a table, and you're going to put the flashlight right next to it, and then shine it in there, and then look through the top, which is really the jar is upside down if you notice. This is the top of the jar, and this is the solid bottom. You're going to put it upside down on a table just like this. So when you put your flashlight here, it should reflect up here. Put it down on the table on a white piece of paper and test it out and make sure you see some light reflected up at your eye. Once you've done that, you are ready to make your lens. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut a square of plastic out of the box that you have. This is going to be your lens. It doesn't matter what size it is, just as long as you can put your thumb here, because what we're going to do next is we're going to punch a hole right in the middle of it. And this is where we're going to put our water droplet. So you punch a hole right in the middle, and that water will stay in there. It will not move because there's the surface tension. And you want to make sure you have enough room for your thumb, because if you touch that, the water drop is going to fall out. It's not going to have that little bubble on the top. Now, once you have your side cut, You're going to put the first object you want to examine onto your microscope, which is the bottom of the jar, which is now upside down, so it's the top, okay? So some things that you can examine that you have around your house are salt, sugar, maybe your hair, maybe a string, or maybe you find some things outside like a leaf or insect, or even some other cool things that you might want to look at a little bit closer. We're going to start today with salt, and that's what I recommend. So put a little bit of salt right on the top of the jar here, which is the bottom, of course. And this is placed on the table with a white piece of paper underneath it. Once that is set up, you are ready to prepare your lens. And the way I got this prepared was by putting a little bit of water, putting it just a little bit of an angle, just a tiny drip of water. You can also try to use a Q-tip. That might help. Just dip it in and put a little bit of water on there. And then it will slowly go towards that hole, and it will stay in the hole as long as I don't touch it or I put it down on the table, because that will break the water surface tension. And then that little bubble, which is our lens of the microscope, will disappear, and you have to add more water, of course. So what you're going to do is first look at the salt and see what it looks like. And then you're going to be able to place your eye and the lens right over it and see what difference it might look. Now, if it's a little bit difficult for you to focus it by moving it up and down, just like in a microscope, we have that knob that focuses and moves it up and down. Well, this, you can move the lens up and down with your hand. But if that's a little bit tricky for you, here's the trick. Take 2 pencils and place them on top of the jar, like this. And then you can put your lens right on top, and then you can move your head up and down to focus it. Now take a look and see what you might see at the salt. And if you're lucky like I was, it might look something like this. Pretty cool, right? Well, go ahead and experiment with some other things that you might have around your house. Like I said, sugar, a piece of hair, a leaf, or an insect. And if you want to be really exploring and look, you could go outside and get some soil sample, like if there's puddles outside. For that, you might want to make a slide, and that you can make the slide of using the plastic from the box, and it doesn't really matter what size they are, just so that there's 2 of the same, and you drop a little drop of liquid there, and then you put the top on there to keep it right between these 2 pieces of plastic, and then go ahead and slide it into your jar right here and see what you might see. You might see some living organisms. That'd be pretty cool. Now, if you think this is really cool, guess what? You can check out a microscope from the library. Just give us a call and you can reserve it, one that looks just like this. So I hope you have fun. I hope you keep exploring, and we'll see you next time. Bye.